All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for the late start. I hereby call to order the Finance and Audit Committee, our regular meeting, May 8th, 5 p.m., Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District. Hereby call to order. We now have the public opportunity to discuss matters of public interest within committee scope, including items on or not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any items?
There are no speakers this evening.
All right, no speakers. Thank you. On to consent items 1 through 4, and Chair will request a motion.
Make that motion to remove the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
All right, first and seconded. Call the roll.
Director Monk,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
and Jones.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to our presentation item, and our first one, I have a lot of interest in this stuff, GEMT. Welcome, CFO McFarland.
Thank you, directors. We have worked on GEMT since, well, I've worked on it since 2011, and I know they started before I got here. So I thought it would be very appropriate to share with you that we received some checks in the mail. And so the money came from Washington, D.C. to Sacramento, and from Sacramento to Metro Fire.
Yay.
Yay. So we, in total, received $2.7 million, and it was just $90,000 more than what we had in the budget. So that was, it did match exactly what was on our cost reports. We just had a revision up after the mid-year numbers had been put in place. So that is everything we're expecting at this time. And in the very far column where it says amount on hold, there's almost 6 million, or 1.2 million almost, of money that is from some of the earlier reports, the short year that was 2009, 2010, and the first quarter of 2011. And at a previous meeting, I think Chief Clough addressed that, being some amounts that will be paid to us eventually, but there's some compliance issues going on between the federal and the state government, and when those are cleared up, then that will, they'll be able to release that additional money to us. But since we don't know what the time frame is on that, we do not have that in the current mid-year budget. So, but I'm going to look at the checks again. I just thought that was, I can't tell you how
Just stare
excited
at
we
them for a
were.
while.
That's
Yeah.
great.
It's
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
So that's what they look like.
Yep.
And without much money, I would have liked to have had a electronic transfer, but you know, we'll take it whichever way they want to give it to us. And this is, they issue checks. So there you go. And as the statewide administrator, we've been hearing from our partners out there, and they have checks coming out as well. We were, you know, helping everybody else and made sure that we had all of our cost reports in on the very first day that we were able to submit them. And so I understand that they only have the distribution out to about 25% of the participants. So we're one of the, you know, 25% that were fortunate enough to already be reimbursed at this point.
Rhonda, so this 2.6 plus is our share?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is not anything we're divvying up with anybody else. So,
We're not sharing.
well, we
our
shared,
share.
we shared the knowledge, we shared the program, and there was a lot of leadership that came from the chiefs here to put this program in place. So, and it's ultimately our members of our district, our citizens, that are benefiting from this, because this is a significant amount of money. It is, I mean, you guys are very familiar with it, but if someone's watching at home, it's retroactive money, because there was a date that the initial program was published in the Federal Register, so that we were able to go back to that date to capture the reimbursements. And it just took a very long time to go through the process with the state and with the federal government to get a cost report that everyone felt comfortable with, and then to roll it out and get all the administrative pieces in place at the state so that this program could go forward. And this is just the beginning. I don't know if you want to say something, Chief?
I would just add, I certainly want to thank Rhonda personally and her staff and all the hard work that they did on this program. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Assistant Chief Scott Clough and Ted Peterson for the Novato Fire Department, who have worked tirelessly on this issue. It is definitely something that we need. As we've told our constituents over the last couple months, what we said was going to happen is probably going to happen as far as revenue coming up for the next budget year. But we are an agency that will continue to push forward, and to that end, Chief Clough, we have an urgency legislation that has been put in by Assemblymember Cooley and Pan. And that urgency legislation is to fix the HMO piece, which is about $3 or $4 million a year for us. And that will, that has so far passed by consent with unanimous approval of both Republicans and Democrats in the committees. And to the point that we didn't even need to show up and testify. It's basically unopposed. We anticipate that that would reach the governor's desk, we hope, somewhere around October, November of this year, which is not that far away. And then it will probably be about a year of resubmitting the same cost reports and getting them processed. In the meantime, very hesitantly and guarded, I will say that we have a potential workaround directly with the HMOs that Chief Clough in the last week has ascertained, which means that we may be eligible for, between now and then when we get that done, a sizable amount of money for both this year, if we have a contract in place with them, and of course next year. So we think we have a patch, at least for our agency and all agencies, but it depends on what county you're in. I don't want to go into too much detail on that until I have absolutely all the nuts and bolts drilled down. We are filling out our application. We will send it, or not application, our contracts that the HMOs have sent us. We will send those to legal ASAP. I believe they're going to be sent tonight or tomorrow morning. And we're hoping that we would be able to get those in. If we get them in by June 30th, we're told, then we'd be eligible for all the retro for this current fiscal year that we're in, which could be anywhere between $1 million and $3 million. There is a cut in this particular type of program, which the urgency legislation will fix, of about 20%, I believe, to the state, and another 1.5% in some sort of tax, and the rest in a handling fee to the HMO. So we're exploring that, and so this GMT reimbursement is huge. I believe it was about 120 million statewide that came in, and that, of course, will be about 80% higher once we have the HMO piece finished. And then last but not least, in December, we will be submitting legislation in regards to cost recovery for first responder medics on the engine companies for reimbursement, which the federal government said they would reimburse us, but we need to fix the state legislation. And so we are doing that, but we're going to do it in December. That was a strategic decision that was made, and we'll be moving forward on that. And last but not least, what I'd like to say to all the doubters out there that were not on this board of directors, but I had a lot of people who told me that this was never going to happen, and there was a lot of doubting Thomases on GEMT, and they were wrong. And so this is that first definitive proof that it's there. Metro Fire, Dwayne Aaron, Scott Clough, they were on the cutting edge, Assistant Chief Dwayne Aaron, when they found this. And then through the hard work of all of them and Rhonda's team and everything, you know, hats off and kudos. And that concludes my comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Chief, I'm just curious, since you started this, and I know you had strategic partners going forward with it to get to where you are you seeing people wanting to jump on after the fact, or agencies?
Well, I think what we are seeing is not so much the agencies wanting to jump on. I think that in this first component, we had to have support from statewide labor and large organizations who, you know, 3 years later started to wonder, once they got the legislation passed, was this really going to come to fruition? But we need them for that HMO component, because that's another $300 million a year into the state. And so I think, and I don't blame them. I just wanted to crow a little. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing with this is, this now shows them that this is real, and that HMO piece has absolutely got to get pushed through, and they didn't hesitate. They jumped right on. We need those lobbying coordination between Cal Chiefs, Metro Chiefs, League of Cities, and CPF to get this through, and they're just doing a tremendous job. So I think that's the benefit, is not so much that people jumped on, but that, because all of them, when they thought they were going to get free money, certainly wanted to get in the line. But a recovery, free money is a bad way to put it, but we really needed that political clout and this win to be able to generate the synthesis to move forward and get this next piece done, which is about 80% of the money that's still on the table. So, and we're going to need it, because as I said, and this board said, there is no miraculous recovery coming in property taxes. Surprise to those people out there on television that are watching that told everybody that it was going to happen. They were wrong. And you're going to see that coming up in the new budget. And I have a feeling that the following year is going to be more of the same. I do not believe that we are going to see the explosive recovery in the Sacramento region that they're seeing in Southern California. They're seeing in the Bay Area is already back to pre-2005 pricing. So, I mean, those, I've taken some ribbing on that, but we're in a different economic environment, and we'll deal with it. I feel absolutely confident we'll get through it. I'm not concerned about that at all, but I think the public will find out that when we say what we are going to do, we mean what we say, and that's unfortunate, but we'll work through it. But this is positive news.
Very good. I'll just sum it up, because I don't think I really gave it an intro, because we've been talking about it so long, but this is reimbursement from the federal government for transporting Medi-Cal patients, which we received a nominal reimbursement before, and this actually makes the reimbursement up to 50% of our costs being recovered at this point. So that's it. And I'm going to move on to the next item if
Yes, ma'am.
if there's
Thank you.
anything else. Yeah. Oops. Hang on just a minute. I hit the wrong button. It's not going to let me take that back, but we'll just start it. Okay. We had our last meeting canceled, and so this report through February 28th is a little bit late, and we'll be following it up at our next meeting with the following report. So this will catch you up through the end of February, and then shortly following, you'll be getting a report for the subsequent 2 months. Okay. We have a format that we follow where we take a look at our cash and we compare it to the last couple of years. And it looks like everything is tracking fairly close to prior years, but in actuality, if you refer back to page 25 of your board report, we have about 1.2 million more in cash on hand at this point than we did in the prior year. And in addition, and our total cash balance is at this point was $29.7 million. We had just received the second part of our property tax money, so it's a little higher than what we had in the prior report. In addition, we footnote at the bottom the amount of money that we have in our pre-funding for our post-retirement medical, and that's at $4.6 million at the end of February. Anticipate by the end of the fiscal year, it'll be closer to $8 million. And that's 2.6 million more than what we had in the previous year. So the current year is an improvement. Going on to the next slide is our operating fund reserves. We are at 4.2%. We're 2/3 the way through the fiscal year, yet there's a significant amount of revenue still to come in yet for our property taxes. That particular number is only at about 56%. So by the end of the year, we should be at the 11% that we're projecting. I am currently working on some updates for the chief to see if we can get that number up even just a little bit more on a couple things that aren't going to come to pass as far as costs. And so I would say that's the minimum number that we're going to be at the end of the fiscal year.
Excuse me, Rhonda, could you please repeat that number that you gave for the fund for pre-funding retiree health care? You said we had 2.6 more
Okay,
than
I'm
we did
sorry,
last
it's not
time.
actually not on the slide, but it's on your report that you received with your agenda, and it's page 25.
Okay.
And in the small print at the bottom, we don't list it on our cash because this
Oh.
is a trust fund. And so, once it's a trust fund, it's separate from our books, but it's certainly something that's very, very important. So we like to footnote it there and kind of keep an eye on that. In addition, we also have an OPEB oversight committee, and Director Kelly sits on that for the board, as well as labor, a retiree, and myself. And so we meet quarterly.
All right.
And we're, okay, go
Oh,
ahead.
no, that's great, and it's very good to keep us reminded of that. So you mentioned the 2.6, is that more than was anticipated, or is that the amount from last year at this time?
It's basically what we anticipated. I will say to date, the earnings are at about $400,000 for the year-to-date on the SERP Trust. And I
Okay.
think their return is higher than the 7.25% assumption that we make. So it won't be able to be reflected in the current actuarials, but in a future actuarial, we should see a small gain from that.
Right. No, I just think that that's a fantastic program that we started, and I want to keep crowing about it, to use our vernacular.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to move on to basically highlight some of the revenue expenditures and where we are to date for the year. We are at 20.7 million on the medic cost recovery, 37.5% higher than the prior year. And the most significant thing impacting that is that we did implement the I'm sorry, I've got that on my mind. We implemented the single role paramedic program. And so that was effective March of 2013. And so when we compare this year to last year on medic revenue, we have, our full 8 months with single role paramedic revenue, which is running about $700,000 a month, whereas the prior year did not have that reflected at all because the program was being developed and wasn't launched until March 1st.
Just for the board's clarification, and so that you're aware, we, of course, will have the budget hearing, a budget meeting on Monday with about 40 or 50 people here, our annual budget. I believe Director Jones attends those budget deals. And what I will say is that even with the success of the single role paramedic program has been phenomenal. We will be preparing a report in the next couple weeks because I think that, and I have just mentioned to labor, we've had some conversations, we will be expanding that program perhaps for this next fiscal year. And unfortunately, not to be able to open new engine companies as we had anticipated, but probably to keep from closing more than 1 or 2 engine companies. So we will be taking a look at that. The other issue is that I have my 2 top financial people, Rhonda and of course Scott Clough. Scott Clough has his numbers, Rhonda has her numbers. This is no disrespect to the CFO. I hope Clough's right. But at the end of the day, he would tell you that we're running significantly higher than the $30,500,000 we had in this year's budget. And but we're working to see how that actually plays out. So all of this is good news for us, but it needs to be looked at in the vein that Had we not done this, we would be in deep, deep trouble. And if we don't somehow get some sort of expansion as part of a solution for next year, it's going to be a very, very tough road to slog. And so, this EMS issue is just a huge, huge part of what we do and a huge part of funding the overall fire department at this point. And when I came here, I believe our revenue was somewhere around 13 million a year in EMS revenue 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago. So to be upwards of 30 million, 31 million, that's a big, big jump. And you can just imagine the damage that would have happened had we not got that program, Scott Clough's credit, up and running.
I don't always have to be right, but I tend to be conservative, and Chief Clough certainly is the boots on the ground, so I respect his input, absolutely. On community risk reduction, we're at year-to-date of about $1 million. It's a small increase from the prior year. Similar to last year, they're doing the bulk of their inspections during the spring and into the end of June. We also had, at the same time, one of the delays had to do with getting the new inspection rates in place. And the other thing that I'm finding is that we changed who does the third-party billing for the inspections, and some of the transition as far as getting the information over has been delayed. So our revenue is probably in the neighborhood of 300,000 more than what I'm reflecting in these financial statements. And it's basically because there'd been, until this week, I hadn't seen those numbers, and they have just recently provided that to the third-party biller so that those bills can go out and be collected. So there's a little catch-up that has to happen as far as the billing, and then there's a major throttle going on right now as far as getting inspections done, and our Assistant Chief over Community Risk Reduction feels confident that we will meet the budgeted amount. Okay. The last area I was going to mention under revenue had to do with the property taxes. We are 6 million higher than the prior year. We are tracking right on what we had anticipated as far as our budget goes. I have no information at this time that tells me that we won't be right at what we budgeted. We did get another payment at the end of April, and again, it tracked to what we were expecting. They still don't have all of that second payment posted, so we'll continue to watch it. Part of why we have a larger increase this year than percentage-wise than the change in assessed value is in previous years there had been some large refunds. We had refunds again this year, but so far we're still tracking with the budget. They're less than the prior year, so that reflected on a higher percentage. And so just in general, the total revenue has a 16.3% increase, of which the lion's share has to do with the medic revenue that the chief spoke of.
Yeah, and I'd just like to point out, because what happens is you look at this bulk number and you go, wow. But remember, we got expenses that go with this to put a lot of this stuff out. So this isn't like we've got 16.3%, 12.7 million hard cash. We still have expenses that we're dealing with, and I don't want the public out there to get the wrong idea. This kind of, it's accurate, but it gives a picture that is not as clear as it will be in the next couple weeks when we lay it out.
Right, and just, to add on to that, we're still in a budget where our property tax money is over 20 million less than what we had received back in 2008. And our expenditures continue to rise, so when we get to my next slide after this, I'll kind of dovetail into some more comments on that. Labor costs, one of the things that I probably should have mentioned at the get-go is this board adopted the mid-year budget in March, And we went ahead and compared the February to the mid-year because it really didn't make any sense to go back and do a budget that had been superseded. So I'll just make that point. And with those mid-year changes to labor, we are at 87.9 million. We are tracking where we need to be as far as the labor costs go. And in fact, we're just, I think, slightly under the budget. We're at 65% instead of 66.7. And we always like to emphasize that we've had some significant concessions. 5.6 million in concessions is netted against that total cost. And those concessions are about $1 million less than last year due to some adjustments in how we have to pay our overtime rates. We are also, our constant staffing is at 62.4%, so I feel like that is a good place to be at this point in the year. And that was, again, once we had added in the deployments and so forth. So we're on budget as far as that goes. And our service and supplies are also under budget at 54.4%. Okay, so it made sense to me to look at what the bottom line is and not just the revenues and the expenditures. So if we take a look at comparing it to the prior year, we actually have a almost 7 million deficit, of which when we compare it to last year, we're better than we were at this point last year. But we also compare it to budget, and we're $11 million, but we are comparing 10 months to the whole year's budget. So we do anticipate being at about at least $1 million that we'll be able to add to the reserves to pay things that are not, necessarily expenditures, reinvesting and getting to our reserve levels based on our policies and so forth, and to be our war chest as we're looking at a very, very difficult budget year coming up in 14-15.
Yeah, and I just want to, in all fairness and clarity, that is temporary. That means that the reserve may grow by $1 million or $2 million bucks. It might shrink by 4 or 5. So in the next budget year. So I just want people to be aware that's the type of situation that we're dealing with. But we are working very, very hard to build those up. And but I don't want that false sense out there that's all's well and it's going to stay there. I think we've got another couple of years of hard work to do.
Okay, so moving on to the Capital Facilities Fund. We're at 55.7% of budget. This is even with lowering the capital facility development fee budget at mid-year. And so we're slightly under budget. This is one that doesn't necessarily come in evenly during the year. And it was our best information when we put this together. I can't tell you if we will necessarily meet budget at the end of fiscal year, but I'll be surprised if we don't. But right now, we're not tracking at 66.7. We're at 55.7.
And again, I think this is one of those slides that indicates that the economy here in the Sacramento region, this indicates development fees, building going on in that, and we're struggling even compared to fiscal year 2012 and somewhat fiscal year 2013. So this is, again, one of those things that people want to believe that everything's going to be perfect. But you've got to read the roadmap, and the roadmap, even though this could spring up and all of a sudden in March, April, or May, although I don't think we've seen that, it'll be reported on, we have not seen a big jump.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, just to kind of add on to that, going into next year, we have a number of capital projects that we did in the past that we fund the debt service out of the Capital Facilities Fund, and we do not anticipate that there will be any reserves to pay for that. And we will actually have to supplement this fund to pay the debt service from the general fund. So that's another thing that's putting pressure on the general fund. And then other financing sources, if you take a look at page 33 of your report that you were provided, we do have plans for some additional financing for equipment. And we had done some earlier in the year for our technology equipment. And now we have another financing that we'll be bringing to the board at the next board meeting that will fund our vehicles, some apparatus, and all of the stuff that was earmarked in the budget to be financed. And so I just thought I would emphasize that that is coming up. I have, at this point, 3 different lessors that are working up rates for us, and so we'll be bringing forward the one that's gives us the best interest rate in terms. And then the last slide, we always talk about our grant program, and they have 17.9 million of grants that are, we have a total of 79 million of open grants, of which 5.3 million are unspent at this point, so. That's it. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, appears no questions. Any further comments? And if not, thank you very much. All right, that closes our presentation items for the meeting. Our next meeting is June 12th, 5 p.m. in this location. And if there are any other agenda items, please contact myself or the clerk. Anything for the good of the order? This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.